Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality factors that may be at work in the Jerry Falwell Jr. allegations. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So Jerry Falwell Jr. was the president of Liberty University, a sizable Christian institution of higher learning located in Lynchburg, Virginia. He is married to Becky Falwell and has been since 1987. At the time of making this video, Jerry Falwell is 58 and Becky Falwell is 53. A man named Giancarlo Granda said that he was approached by Becky Falwell when he was working at a Miami hotel as a pool attendant. He says he was 20 at that time. Other reports say that he was 21. But either way, we see quite an age difference between Granda and Becky Falwell. He claims that she started flirting with him and invited him up to her hotel room for sex. Additionally, he alleges that she said that her husband liked to watch. Granda said that he agreed to these terms, and the relationship continued until 2018. It allegedly involved not only Jerry observing sex, but listening in on phone calls between Granda and Becky. Granda claims that Becky told him that her and her husband were at a swingers club the night before, so this is going back to 2012 at that hotel, but that wasn't their thing. They wanted a more intimate session. Both Jerry and Becky deny the allegations made by Granda. Jerry said that his wife Becky did have an affair, but he didn't watch. He says they've now reconciled. The affair caused Jerry to be depressed, and it's really been quite a struggle. It appears as though Jerry and Granda are in some type of real estate deal that didn't go as planned. Jerry said that Granda is trying to extort him. Granda says that he just wants to be bought out of this deal. So this is why Granda said that he's come forward with these allegations. Now, as a result of this whole mess and some other things that Jerry did in the past, he resigned as president of Liberty University. He had some trouble in the past where he had this photo where his pants were unzipped and he was with a woman whose pants were unzipped. She was pregnant. So things weren't really going well for Jerry Falwell Jr. before this happened with Granda. So again, these are just allegations. Really, they're allegations made by both sides, and the truth is not known at this point. If the allegations are true, I think the concern about Jerry Falwell Jr. is really the hypocrisy. As the president of Liberty University, he promoted values that are inconsistent with watching another man have sex with his wife. Granda isn't actually alleging that there was any criminal activity involved in this, right? So again, it seems restricted to hypocrisy. So stepping back from this particular case, because again, I don't know what happened here, I've seen a number of questions about the alleged activity, right? This idea of a man who enjoys watching his wife have sex with another man. To keep this description simple and straightforward, I'll refer to the couple as a husband and wife. I'll refer to the man who is invited to have sex with the wife while the husband watches as the guest. The terms used by people who engage in this activity are a little bit different. The guest is usually referred to as a bull. The wife is referred to as a vixen. But the term for the husband is dependent on his motive. If the motive is for the husband to be humiliated, he is referred to as a cuck. This is where we get the term cuckold relationship. If that's not his intent, like if he wants to participate and also considers himself to be an alpha male or a bull, the term stag is sometimes used. So over the years in my clinical experience, including supervising counselors who are providing direct service to clients, I've encountered a number of these situations. Most of the time when people talk about this activity, it's historical. So there's a husband, a wife, or a guest, and they're talking about how this behavior occurred 5, 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Every now and then it comes up as a current problem, an issue that one of the individuals wants to come to terms with or to resolve. Just to be clear though, this activity in and of itself is not pathological. It could be part of a pathology, but it does not have to be. When I have seen it as part of a pathology, substance use and paraphilic disorders seem to be evident more so than other disorders. With that in mind, what motivates somebody to get involved in this type of relationship? There are actually many ways this can come about, and the motives could be quite different for each of the three parties. So starting with the guest, again, sometimes referred to as the bull. Usually the guest's motivation is to have sex. No strings attached. He meets the wife, they have sex, the husband watches, and then the guest leaves. It's not really a relationship outside of that interaction. Another possibility for the guest is they like the idea of embarrassing the husband, so they actively seek out these relationships due to that specific component. So it's more than just the sex, it's the humiliation of another man. The wife's potential motivations are a little more complex. In most instances that I've encountered, the wife is engaging in the activity at the husband's request. Every now and then you see a situation where the wife comes up with the idea, and this can happen in a few ways. Perhaps the wife isn't feeling satisfied in the relationship with the husband, but it's just around the area of sex. She does not want a divorce, so she comes up with the idea of sex with a guest. But to make it less wrong or to feel less wrong, less like a betrayal, she agrees to allow the husband to watch. So in a way, the husband in this situation is like supervising the activity, making sure that nothing happens that he would not want to happen. Another motivation for the wife would be that the husband is already dysfunctional sexually, like he can't perform, and the wife wants to keep him included in the activity. So he watches her have sex with the guest, and that brings him some satisfaction by proxy. Now, the sexual dysfunction motivation could also be a motive for the husband. He can't perform like he used to, and it's satisfying for him to watch someone else who can perform. Another situation would be where the wife is dominant, and she wants to have sex with the guest as kind of a sadomasochistic situation with the husband, like she is communicating that the husband is inferior, not satisfying her, and she has to seek satisfaction from another man. But this usually isn't done like in a mean-spirited way. It's kind of a fantasy that's played out. So this kind of ties in with the husband's motivation. Usually what we see here with the husband is that he has this fantasy about being put in his place by an alpha male, by the guest. The husband fantasizes that he can't satisfy his wife, so this guest has to come in and take care of that. And in that process, the husband is embarrassed at his own inferiority. But at the same time, he is aroused by being put in that position. In these instances, the husband is more gratified the larger the discrepancy is between him and the guest in terms of physical strength and aggression, so the ability to dominate. So what happens sometimes is that the sex becomes increasingly vigorous. Usually it's still consensual, but it does tend to escalate because the husband is trying to achieve an increased level of satisfaction. Another thing that can happen here, either initially or as an attempt to escalate, is that the guest will insult the husband during the act. As I mentioned before, some husbands are more like equal participants, so for them it's really not about being submissive. But most of the time, it really is about the submission component. Moving on to the next motive, both the husband and the wife could be equally motivated. One situation might be where they're both interested in swinging, but they don't feel comfortable with that, at least not completely comfortable. It's too public, too big a step, and perhaps the husband really isn't interested in having sex with other women. Therefore, the couple opts for this arrangement that seems less drastic and perhaps safer. It's interesting because this seems to connect to the alleged motive that Granda referred to. Again, he said that he was told the couple wanted to have something more intimate than swinging. Now, I've heard these stories about how these relationships can occur because the husband catches the wife cheating and they somehow compromise with this arrangement. I don't recall ever encountering that as a motive during my clinical experience. I guess it could happen, but it really doesn't seem likely. Another rare occurrence would be where the husband is motivated to have this type of relationship in order to degrade the wife. So she's the one being humiliated. Again, this is possible, but it's not really that common. So in stepping back and looking at this behavior, how does this really turn out for many of the people involved? So what's the outcome? The outcome here is usually negative. There's just a lot of possible ways this can go wrong. The wife can become attracted to one of the guests and leave the husband. The husband can become angry about the arrangement and start treating the wife as if she had an affair. So really like throwing her behavior in her face, even though all the parties agreed to it when it happened. The guests can become jealous or too aggressive. There's a lot of moving parts here, so to speak, and it just gets really quite complex. There's a lot of room for people to get upset. Also, people involved in these situations rarely get a lot of enthusiastic support from family or friends, so they tend to keep it to themselves. So they can start to feel isolated and kind of question the intelligence of their decision, right? So is this a good idea? Should I be doing this? There's really not many people to talk to, which is another good reason to seek out mental health counseling, even if the behavior doesn't rise to the level of something that's pathological. So those are my thoughts on the Jerry Falwell Jr. case and the idea of a cuckold relationship. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching. There's a lot of moving parts here. I didn't really word that too well. There's a lot of parts that can move around. That's not any better at all. That doesn't work. So there are these parts and they move around. I gotta find another way to do this. So in these situations, there are a lot of parts around that are in motion. So these things are complex, right? They're just complex. So when you have this type of cuckold relationship, there are all these parts kind of moving around, and it can get complex. In these relationships, there are a lot of parts moving around, and it's hard to keep track of. That's not any better. So in these relationships, there are all these parts moving around, and people just can't keep track of all the parts. And that leads to the complexity, and then people get upset. All right, that kind of sums it up. The guests can become jealous or aggressive, and this is due to all these parts moving around. There's a number of parts visible in this situation that make the situation complex. In these relationships, there's a lot going on, and that makes things complex, and also makes it so there's a lot of room for people to get upset. It was easier when I just said parts. In these relationships, there's a lot of parts that are moving around, and it confuses people because of all the parts, right? All right.